So with the announcement of Tatsuki Fujimoto's Look Back getting its own film adaptation, and you guys recently blowing up my subscribers and views, thank you so much, I decided it's finally time to read this short manga and give my thoughts about it. To be frank with each and every one of you, of course, I think Look Back easily has the potential to be this generation's A Silent Voice. This story, by the end of it, made me cry. Which I don't do often as my heart is cold and black, but this one, yeah, I knew once the tears rolled from my face I needed to talk about it. So let's go ahead and jump into it. This is Look Back. But before we get into it, if you've read Look Back and you like it and are excited for the film adaptation, drop a like on the video. We cover Chainsaw Man every time a new chapter comes out, and hopefully even more Tatsuki Fujimoto works if you guys share this video around and give it some support. As the story begins, we see that Fujino as a child is clearly the best artist in her class, and she is often praised for it. We see the strip she is praised for, and yeah, for many people who are older and have seen other art from professionals, it's clearly just, not as good. However, there is heart to it, as this strip is about a girl dying and promising to meet her loved one again in 20 years after they're reincarnated after an accident. But 20 years pass and her love is nowhere to be found, but a meteor is going to hit Earth. Fujino's response to this praise is to nonchalantly pass it off as her just finishing it in 5 minutes because it was so not important to her. This is something of a personality trait for Fujino that I quite like, even though it is annoying and I sort of hate it in other people. She's a little arrogant, has a pretty big ego, and as long as someone is praising her, she feels good about herself and what she's doing. Usually, I'd be quite turned off by a character like this and find them annoying, but for Fujino, it feels more like kids being kids and a trait of her person that is actually quite charming at that age. But still, her friends tell her she should become a professional mangaka one day, and to her, that would be a really boring life, just sitting at a desk all day, and she would rather do something like sports. This totally feels like a kid not realizing their natural talents, as while the strip isn't anything to write home about, there is a lot of emotion, character, and thought put into it. The story is somewhat dark, grips you and makes you think about what would happen if you were reincarnated and how you'd find your love again, especially in a world that's about to be destroyed. And for a kid, this is amazing, and Fujino initially doesn't even recognize her gift for art creation and writing, and I mean, how could she? She's a kid. But when she's called to the faculty room, she is asked to turn over a manga slot in the school newspaper to Kyomoto. Not even knowing who this person is, it's revealed that she is a truant in the class next door to hers. With a hint of reluctance, she agrees to do it and boasts how it'll be hard for an amateur to draw decent art, especially from someone who is too scared to leave her room. Which then, of course, when she finally sees Kyomoto's art in the newspaper, she freaks out. Her art is nothing like Fujino's, as the art is filled with immense detail, soul, polish, and style, the likes of which you've never seen before in a child of Kyomoto's age. And of course, kids being kids, they immediately talk down upon Fujino's art. This is when she realizes on the walk home that she, of course she would be good at something like that. She doesn't go to school and just spends all of her time drawing. Prideful as she is, she won't let Kyomoto beat her, and so she goes down a path much similar to Kyomoto's as she studies drawing of all aspects. Fujimoto is really smart in the way he presents it to the audience, as he uses Fujino's bookshelf, which is slowly filled up with books, as you can clearly trace what stage of learning that she is in. Anatomy, sketching, figures, head and figure, all of it is a resource for her over the months and years, as we see her in her room drawing while the window outside changes seasons and weather. But Fujino remains the same, hunched over her desk, drawing and practicing. She's simply enraptured by the entire thing, and it was all because of Kyomoto. This is something as a content creator, musician, and someone who is now studying art, just like those in this story, I relate to this so much. It almost hurts how much I relate to it. In high school, I spent all of it ignoring it and just making YouTube videos and guitar covers. I would literally sit on my bed with my shitty Walmart laptop with a single core processor and 2 gigabytes of RAM, recording myself playing games and uploading it to my main channel, which some of you know about as C-Tactics. That very same channel, I spent years doing what Fujino has been doing, which is cutting my teeth alone, inspired by all of the people I used to watch, wanting to be just like them, and most importantly, even better. the next big thing. Obviously, none of that ever happened, but that passion and drive, I remember it so well. It even kept me from enjoying things as a kid others did. A social life, good grades, the good graces of my authority figures in my life, and I really am still doing the same thing. I'm still to this day rebelling against the ideas of those before and trying to really just forge my own path doing what I love, which is creating this right here, this video you're watching. And if I could, I'd do it all just the same, honestly. And we see the consequences of choosing a passion over being, quote, normal. Her friend tells her that they'll be 6th graders next year and that she's getting too old for drawing, that people will eventually think she is a creepy otaku. And I went through this exact same thing. People told me that I was too old to be doing what I was doing, uploading videos to the internet on whatever video game I could barely get up enough money to afford to buy and play. Even though it made me happy and allowed me to escape, and I knew for a fact it would lead somewhere, still, people judged me because it wasn't, especially at the time, perceived as normal and that I was weird. Even at home, when Fujino's sister asks her to come to her karate class, she gets snappy at her. And very clearly, all she wants to do is just sit in her room all day and do art, get better, chase that exhilarating rush of outdoing her rival, the truant Kyomoto. But grades are not important to her, or going to some karate class to put it on her transcript to help her get a job that's just soul-crushing and worthless to her emotionally. This right here is really what makes her happy. The thrill and excitement from doing what she loves. But still, we see in the next newspaper that once more, compared to Kyomoto's art, Fujino is simply lacking in detail polish, even though she's gotten so much better and the art is really damn good, especially for her age. But she's just not as good as Kyomoto, and even after sacrificing her, life to try and get better, just wasn't enough. So, like anyone, she gives up after being defeated. She was supposed to be the best at art, and if she can't be the best, then she simply cannot be. She was making comparisons. So she returns to being normal, hanging out with her friends, watching movies with the fam, and even getting rid and throwing away her art books. And as graduation comes sometime later, she is asked to deliver Kyomoto's diploma to her at her home. At this point, she doesn't want to do it, as this is the girl who defeated her in, art Mortal Kombat. Going into her house, she finds a ton of used art books, and seeing a strip, she draws a little comic on it in which 2 groups of people are cheering for her to come out and not to come out in a made-up championship game of the shut-in finals, as an announcer announces that she's in the lead, only to reveal in the final panel that she's a skeleton. It's a pretty funny comic, like most of Fujino's so far. However, she accidentally drops it and it slips under her door, so she panics and basically runs out of her house. Then out comes Kyomoto, finally revealing herself to the outside world and Fujino. She's wearing pajamas, which by the way looks really comfortable. Maybe I'm a little jealous. And with a wild, unkempt haircut. Turns out that while Fujino was growing in her head this person that she thought Kyomoto would be, in reality she sees Fujino as a sensei and looked forward to her comic every week in the school newspaper and used it to inspire her to push forward and get even better. And in fact, she wants an autograph, so Fujino signs her shirt of all things, which just goes to show how much Kyomoto looks up to Fujino. But Kyomoto is such a big fan, she even remembers the names, the dates they ran, everything. She could trace how Fujino even improved and wonder why, as it started to get better, why she suddenly stopped making them. Fujino, with her massive ego, shrugs it off and basically improvises this story that she's taking time to make her own manga and stuff, but she hasn't drawn it yet. It's just all in her head. She just needs to put pen to paper. Kyomoto is beyond ecstatic, which is a trait that is really so charming about her character. She's enthralled with all that Fujino does. She doesn't see the art being bad as being bad because to her, it isn't. You see, there's something I noticed while reading that I think is important. Fujino's art isn't great, but her writing is funny and thought-provoking. It's very good, while Kyomoto's has no stories. It's just background art that is really detailed and lifelike. This obviously works out for both of them as they start to work on manga together, as they both get better and better over time and complement each other's strengths and weaknesses equally. Then, after we get these amazing panels with beautiful art of Fujino walking through the rain home as she's dancing, feeling elated, Fujino's ego was fueled and given rebirth by Kyomoto's utter gushing over her sensei. And I gotta say, this scene is going to be amazing in the film when it is finally released. No way it doesn't steal the hearts of anyone who watches it, because I feel every bit of this moment in the manga. So Fujino gets home, still wet from the rain, drops everything everything and begins to draw again. Now time passes, except Fujino isn't alone anymore. She has Kyomoto with her eagerly drawing backgrounds while she's at school. They're now a team, or so you think. They even get to the point where they meet with a Shueisha rep who basically tells them that what they've created is amazing because artists of that age aren't even remotely as good as they are. They tell them that at the very least they'll get an honorable mention. But upon running of the issue, they trek through the snow to a convenience store where they flip through the new issue to find that they're the runner-ups of the entire contest. However, the name of the manga isn't credited to Fujino, which does anger Kyomoto, and I love how Fujimoto drew her face too. It looks like she went feral in that moment and wanted to rip off somebody's face. And that's understandable. But as they've won this 1 million yen, Fujino withdraws a 100,000 of it, which is insane. Even Kyomoto's like, we could buy a house with this. Fujino wants to go out on the town and treat themselves, while Kyomoto was initially like, hey, shouldn't we save this? But she agrees to go and have fun, and good for the both of them. They deserve that. But the issue at this point in the story, if you haven't caught it, is that there is an imbalance in their relationship. Fujino gets all of the credit. Fujino got all of the prize money. Fujino wants to go out on the town for a night. All of these things Kyomoto either disagrees with or isn't being treated as Fujino's equal. In other words, Fujino is taking Kyomoto for granted and feeding her ego, which, while at the moment very subtle, is slowly causing a growing rift between the two. This sort of unequal dynamic continues as Kyomoto is the one to thank Fujino for treating her, which kind of isn't right, obviously. Then she opens up to Fujino further and reveals to her that she is glad that she came out of her room. She was too scared of people to come out of it, but today they had so much fun and she realizes taking this chance with Fujino helped her grow as a person. Now over time, the two create one shot after one shot, working hard together. Still, all of which are only credited to Fujino. No mention of Kyomoto, which I think this is also a reference to Tatsuki Fujimoto's prolific short stories released before his first published manga. Then again, I'm pretty sure this entire book is just Tatsuki Fujimoto's life. But that's maybe another video for another day. They then are told their manga will be serialized, finally achieving their dream. But curiously, Kyomoto isn't as excited as Fujino is. This leads into a heart-wrenching moment in which Kyomoto tells Fujino she wants to go to art school to get better at her art and not rely on Fujino any longer. This pretty much leads to Fujino berating Kyomoto and essentially telling her she can't do anything without her and she'll be a failure. Remember that charming aspect of her ego as a kid I was talking about? Well, as she grew up, this trait was reinforced in her to be something that has now compromised their friendship. Instead of sharing the credit, the workload, the responsibility, the passion, Fujino for years really has been taking all of the credit and glory of that and leaving Kyomoto feeling neglected and as if she's not good enough. But our dear Kyomoto has changed in that time. She's gotten stronger, better, more brave, and Fujino hasn't even noticed any of this growth within her. She's now willing to push herself to go to school alone, to talk to people, to learn new things in her life and get out of her shell. But Fujino stubbornly clings onto Kyomoto because in reality, she needs her in her life. She can't do it without her, and the kicker is that she always could do it without her. The ugly truth is that Kyomoto can. What Fujino perceives as Kyomoto's weakness is in reality her biggest asset, her most indomitable strength, and Fujino cannot accept it. Fujino made a mistake, a big one, and she didn't even realize that from the very first time they released their one-shot, they've been drifting apart. Slowly, subtly, but surely. Kyomoto, in one simple statement with tons of emotion, just says, I want to become a better artist. And that shows everything you need to know about Kyomoto and her character. She's strong, brave, and intelligent, really, more than Fujino could ever be. And that's the beauty of it all. Kyomoto's strength let Fujino blossom. So now it's time for Kyomoto to focus on herself and pursue her own happiness, not Fujino's. So as time passes, Fujino sits alone in her new fancy office with computers and drawing tablets as we see her manga Shark Kick, a play on and obvious reference to Tatsuki Fujimoto's first serialized work Fire Punch, which eventually receives an anime adaptation. However, on January 10th, 2016, Fujino looks over to see on the news that someone wielding an axe went into his school and attacked the students there. The same school that Kyomoto was attending. She goes to immediately call Kyomoto, but instead her mother calls her, and it's here I realized, oh no, the worst has just occurred. This is the point where I started to pretty much cry for the remaining of this story. And How could I not? It immediately goes into a flashback where on a snowy and windy night, the two, as kids again, are just hanging out. Kyomoto expresses to Fujino she wishes she could do better and just be faster at drawing in general. So Fujino tells her to improve her art skills because then her speed will increase with them. So she says she'll get better at drawing just like Fujino. Then, maybe not realizing it, but she seals Kyomoto's fate as she tells her to keep her eyes on her back. And I realized here that through all of this growing apart, Kyomoto deep down went to art school in the first place to get better not just for herself, but for Fujino, to impress her and be just like her. That's all she wanted, was to be just like her sensei Fujino, her hero. And as Shark Kick goes on hiatus, Fujino visits Kyomoto's shrine and wow, this was some powerful stuff seeing the despair on her face. Fujino back then said all of those demeaning things to Kyomoto only because she wanted to protect herself. She didn't really mean any of it. It was a mechanism for her to cope, and because she never learned how to do that, she lashed out at her and now lost her one true soulmate in this world, Kyomoto. Seeing a stack of manga, Fujino picks it up to find that the strip that Fujino drew the day they met, the very one that got Kyomoto to leave her room, was being used as a bookmark. This little strip, with the power to change a little girl's life all of those years later, makes Fujino realize one thing. It's all her fault. If she never drew it, she never would have left her room. She never would have went to art school to impress Fujino. She wouldn't be dead. Kyomoto would be a shut-in. Fujino would be a normal person just like her sister. They both would still be alive. So she asks herself why she drew and comes to a conclusion, just like all those years ago, that drawing is useless for her. And because of that, begins to tear up the strip as only the first panel of it remains. Don't come out. Just like before, what's left of the strip falls through the door and finds a young Kyomoto who sees it and then reads it. I'm kind of getting a little misty-eyed right now. Hard to read the script, sorry. She doesn't come out. She never meets Fujino, and she now alone draws in her room and experiences many of the same things over again, but alone. But she is eventually accepted into art school as the fateful day comes as the crazed man who believes Kyomoto stole from him walks in with a pickaxe and proceeds to attack Kyomoto, only for this time Fujino to save the day and kick him in the back, stopping the murder spree and saving Kyomoto and those others from death. In the process, though, she breaks her leg, and Kyomoto, wanting to show her thanks, asks her for her phone number as she sees the name and realizes it. It's Fujino sensei from school all those years ago. And just like when they first met, she asks why she stopped drawing, and she simply says she started again and wants her to be her assistant, which brightens up her face much in the same way it did when they were kids. Kyomoto at home then finds the original strip of Fujino's story where she waited to be reincarnated to wait for her true love again. She then finds a blank set of panels and begins to draw on them a story in which the hero, Fujino sensei, saves Kyomoto from a pickaxe-wielding assailant. The wind blows, sending the slip under the door, where it slips under to find Fujino, and so she sees it and walks through the door to find Kyomoto's room filled with Shark Punch volumes and posters. Even after their argument and their separation, Kyomoto still loved Fujino deeply and followed everything she did. After all she wanted to do was impress her sensei. And the real kicker, on the door hangs the signed shirt that she signed for Kyomoto as a kid. That's what's most heartbreaking about all of this to me. Kyomoto never gave up on Fujino and still saw her as her sensei, someone to one day be as good as. But the reality of it is she was all she ever needed to be from the start. Fujino realizes how they drifted apart now and how much this friendship, or if you interpret it this way because of Fujino's strip, their love for each other brought so much meaning to their lives, a purpose to keep going. The next part was just full-on waterworks for me, and curiously, I think Fujimoto himself coming through. Fujino talks about the process of drawing manga and how she feels that it's a hassle and unglamorous and that she could draw all day long and be nowhere near finished. She'd just be better sticking to reading manga and shouldn't draw. So she asks why she draws in the first place. It's clear, as the rest of the manga is just panels of Kyomoto and Fujino drawing together, having fun and sharing their life with one another as Fujino gets back up on her feet and continues drawing and making manga. It's never said by her why she continues. It doesn't need to be said, because the reason is Kyomoto. Because from the start, the only reason she ever did all of this was Kyomoto. She was ready to give up, but she wanted above all else to be the best, and Kyomoto was always better than her. So she did it for Kyomoto. To see that smile on her face when they finish a draft or have moments where they fall to the floor laughing with one another. You see, Fujino never wanted the money the fame or, whatever. These were all just projections by her. Deep inside her, all she really wanted truly was compassion, to be accepted and to be loved for who she was, and Kyomoto gave her that feeling and vice versa. Kyomoto was a gem, a diamond in the rough, and Fujino knew this subconsciously and wanted nothing more than to spend the rest of her life working with Kyomoto. She didn't want to let go. She wasn't ready. She never was ready, and she still will never be. And now she realizes that, but it's just too late. Life will give and life will take, and on January 10th, it took Kyomoto, and there is nothing that can undo that for her. But at the same time, what can't be undone or taken away is the time they spent together. It means something. It's important to them both. So because of those times, Fujino continues drawing because she needs to do it for Kyomoto. It's just that now she won't ever be able to show her and see that face light up any longer. Look Back, to me, is just spectacular. The relationship between these two characters and their story of growing up and the tragedy that follows made me reflect deeply on my own life and the ways I felt back then and what I still want to do in my own life. It also made me question, like Fujino, why she even does what she does. And it's that saying, right? You remember what you were even fighting for? Along the way, we forget what that is and why it's so important to us. We get caught up in relationships falling apart, money, fame, recognition, and the ever-complicated world we are subjected to and are forced to experience. We forget the Kyomoto in our lives, and sometimes it takes a tragedy to remember what it all means and what it all at one point meant. Because just like Kyomoto and Fujino, we all sometimes forget the light, but when we go back to our roots, we remember, and we discover again our Kyomoto or Fujino, and our purpose is renewed. We don't take what we had for granted, and we cherish what is left of that life we used to have. And eventually this entire process repeats itself again and again, long after we're gone and long before we have ever existed. What Look Back means to me is that we should appreciate what we have while it's here with us to appreciate. It's all about rebelling against what society tells us to be and finding other people who are like us and damn near worshiping them if you can do it. And if the worst does happen, if all hope is lost, it is up to us to continue on the flame and carry the torch of the dreams of those who cannot dream anymore. It's not about anything more than that, and it'll never be anything more or less than that. This right here, this one shot is what we have. This is what it's all about, and you can't waste it. For me, I don't believe Fujino killed Kyomoto. I believe the man with the pickaxe did, of course. But in fact, I believe that really, Fujino saved Kyomoto and vice versa. Would Kyomoto have survived? I don't know, but that's not really the point. The point is that it's better to have left the room and face the potential danger of dying than staying in a room all day to die forgotten. There is someone out there who needs you and someone you need. It seems really stupid to say that, but to me, this story proves it. There is always someone who needs something you have. Nobody is worthless. We all have a purpose and a tool set that you have that nobody else does. And I think that Look Back suggests we find Kyomoto and we never let her go. Whether you die or choose to pass on your lineage to your children, we will find her again in another life because there is always going to be a person who needs you the most. And that is why, to me at the very least, Tatsuki Fujimoto's Look Back is a masterpiece. If you haven't, please do consider subscribing. By doing so, you'll never miss a Chainsaw Man video from me. As well, if you enjoyed this video on Look Back and want me to cover other Fujimoto works, then drop a like on the video and leave a comment what story you'd like me to cover. Thank you everyone for watching on this Look Back at Look Back. Bye-bye.